Hello class, welcome to the discussion recap from week 4. So one of the discussions was on VLANs and subnets, asking what are VLANs and subnets, what's the difference between the two, how do they work, etc. VLANs and subnets can be synonymous in some sense. You'll hear NetAdmins sometimes using the two synonymously. They are not the same thing, but oftentimes they work hand in hand so much, and because most networks have VLANs, again, they're kind of used synonymously. But the difference between the two is subnet refers to the breakup of an IP range via its subnet mask. So that's actually dealing with like the numbers side of things, and you can have subnets without VLANs, but you can't have a VLAN without a subnet, because that VLAN is basically a kind of a package, you might say, or like a freight car. It contains the IP address range and transports traffic based upon that range. So VLANs work at layer 2, where edge switches just know that a particular device is plugged into a particular switch port and it's on a particular VLAN, and it forwards traffic. I should use the correct terminology. It forwards traffic based upon that VLAN. Whereas a layer 3 device will actually route traffic based upon its IP address. So that's the difference between the two. And the benefits of having a VLAN and subnet, of course we've talked about subnetting and how you can actually break up an IP range to better supply your network with hosts and different network ranges, etc. It allows for organization and for proper segmenting of the network, and also VLANs play into that. They help package all of that up. They provide basically a container for the security to apply to. So you can have VLANs set up on switches that will route traffic only to the internet, let's say. They don't allow cross VLAN traffic. In other words, they don't allow internal access to any resources. It's just internet access. Or you have some VLANs, let's say, that only allow access to one particular resource but not the internet. You can really start kind of clamping down on what's allowed in particular VLANs, and it allows you to basically put those computers or those devices plugged into the switches into kind of a container, much like you would in Active Directory with group policy and how that applies. So that is the benefit of a VLAN and having them on the switch. All right, the next discussion point was a scenario where a printer was set up on the network. It was given the appropriate IP address. It was plugged into a switch that had the proper VLAN to it. There was network activity. So you know that the cable was fine, the switch was fine, the VLAN was fine, and you could even test the VLAN if you wanted to. Unplug the printer, plug your laptop into it. Your laptop should pull an IP address on that specific subnet, and so that would be good. Then you go to the printer and you print out a network configuration page, and that's what I showed on the discussion. And really that page contained the answer to the solution in this particular scenario. Now again, a lot of these scenarios, this is not always going to be the answer, but this is one place you should check. And in this particular instance, this was the answer to the solution. So the page here, as you can see, shows the IP address of the printer down here. So it's supposed to be on the 10.1.40.96. And then so we check the rest of the page here. Subnet mask is 255.255.0.0. Well, when you check the network documentation as stated in the discussion scenario, the notation for the VLAN was the 10.1.40.1/24, which means it's a 24-bit subnet. 24 bits means that 3 of these octets is taken up by ones. So this one right here, instead of showing 0, should have been 255. So a 24-bit subnet will mean that all 3 octets are used for the network address. So the subnet is incorrect. That will cause routing issues or forwarding issues. And then also notice the default gateway. The gateway address is usually the core or distribution switch, the router that knows how to route all the traffic. So this is the address of that particular VLAN. Each VLAN has a default gateway on that core switch or that distribution switch that basically says, yes, this is the VLAN, this is all of the information for the VLAN, this is the routing information, this is where you can go, this is where you can't go. And so the default gateway is also incorrect. It should be 10.1.40.1, not 10.2.40.1. So that's the answer to this solution. Change the subnet mask and the default gateway. Those are actually very common things to overlook. If you have software that's, let's say you're using the web app on the printer, you're applying the IP address, and as you're typing stuff in, it begins to autofill based upon what it thinks the answer is. And usually if you type in, let's say the 10 dot whatever range, it might autofill just with an 8-bit subnet, so 255.0.0.0. Again, if you're not paying attention and if you're moving really fast and if your brain thinks, oh yeah, I've already done that, you'll skip right over it. Or you'll begin to, in some cases, yeah, no, it's a 24-bit subnet, so you type 255.255, and you think you tab over to the next octet and you type in 255, and again, you're going fast and you just don't pay attention that it didn't apply. You move on to the next line, and so sometimes that happens. The default gateway is also really easy to miss. You can either enter the wrong subnet information, just if your mind is thinking about something else, or in some cases, because if you're a net admin that has multiple sites that deals with different subnets, a lot of times you might forget, what campus you're at, what building you're in, or whatever the case may be. So it's just one of those things that happens, and it causes network issues for that particular device, and it can kind of make you want to pull your hair out. So start simple. Always start simple. Just go back over, check some of the basic things. Check your cable, check the connection, make sure it's firm in the back. Okay, you've got lights, the switch is pulling an IP address, so that's good. Check your device, make sure it's set properly, and away you go. Sometimes, side note, some devices that you plug into the network, and we've had this happen, where it's been given a static IP address, much like the printer here, but on a different subnet. And so you might think, okay, it's going to pull DHCP when I plug it into the network, and it's already been configured, but it's the wrong configuration. So you have to go into the settings and change that. So just some things to look out for. Y'all did really good with troubleshooting this. Again, there's no getting it right. You did an excellent job, and I look forward to your next discussions.